Hey everybody, my name's Amy Green and I am thrilled that you're going to be walking with me today, that you've chosen to do that. And we're going to go 10,000 steps, which is the goal distance. And I'm just going to take you through my neighborhood. And I walk pretty quickly, and you may not walk quite as quickly as I do. That's okay. When we talk about the turnaround time to head for home again, you'll still have gotten about the same rough amount of standing time, at least, with me. So let's get walking shoes on. Everybody get ready to go, and we're just going to take a walk together. So it is a surprising day, which is why I'm really excited to get this walk in today and get it done. It is actually February 1st when I'm taping this, but we have managed to get this absolutely beautiful day today. It's in the 60s, the low 60s. I've waited all morning until it got nice and warm so that we could go and take advantage of really a sparkling day. But you're gonna notice that there's no green stuff coming up. Trees are not leafing out, and it is really actually February. The other thing that this gorgeous day brought us was wind. And while the wind isn't really cold today, I'm hoping that you're not hearing a whole bunch of wind on this video. I may lose the hat over it. As soon as we get over this little bit of a hill, the wind should calm down just a little bit. And I have to get us through this little wind tunnel where things will settle down, I hope. And I live on a hill, and the initial blast of air when we crest the hill and start walking every day, it's a lot of wind always. It really doesn't matter what the day is like. We still get wind. It can be the stillest day ever. I have a walking buddy who I usually am with every day when I take my walks. And when we do our neighborhood, we always laugh about the fact that no matter which direction we're walking in, somehow we're always walking into the wind. So we have weathered in our area loads of really miserable cold ice weather. Lots of snow, weird snow for us. We don't usually get big old puffy snow like we've gotten this year, but this year for some reason we got puffy snow, and a lot of it didn't last long good, which was the good news, but we got it nonetheless. So I thought I'd tell you a little bit on this walk of the story of my neighborhood where I live. It's an interesting area. It has an interesting history. So my walk today is from Middle Tennessee, and the area around here was actually settled kind of late in American history. The area was originally given as a gift to a family whose last name was Mayfield, and they were from North Carolina. And the grant was given by the governor of North Carolina, who was appointed by the King of England. So this predates the United States government forming, and the Mayfields were apparently just a wealthy family who managed to ingratiate themselves with the governor in North Carolina, and he rewarded them with this massive territory of land. And this territory of land, for those of you who kind of know the Middle Tennessee area, went from what we now know of as the Hundred Oaks area, and it went all the way through from the Hundred Oaks area to what now would be called Brentwood. So this is just this massive piece of territory that this family was rewarded with. And the original family that got the grant never actually came to see the property. They certainly were grateful, I guess, for having it, but they never came here. The young sons, grandsons actually, of the original granting family did come here to check out the property and to see this massive piece of land that their grandparents were rewarded with. And they arrived in the early 1800s. And what they discovered, or I guess it was actually maybe the late 1700s, but they discovered when they got here was nothing. There was not a lot here. Nashville was barely started, and it was growing quickly, but it was barely there. And coming south of Nashville, there certainly wasn't anything much in those days. And so they started an outpost trading post, and traded with Native Americans in the general area for, actually nobody's really sure exactly what they traded for. I don't think it was a long-lived or very successful trading post. And they were at one point actually under attack by Native Americans who overran the fort, the trading post area. It wasn't a military outpost, it was a trading post. And the people who were in the trading post did not survive. But one of the Mayfield boys had very, very red hair, orange hair. And that was an anomaly enough that he was taken as a captive, as a prisoner. And he traveled for several years with this tribe, and learned a lot about the area, and was taken frequently, apparently, into areas south of here and into Alabama. And he eventually did make his way back to the area, and he married and decided to make his home in the general area of where the fort had once been. And that house actually still stands. It's the Mayfield House, and it's privately owned. People live there. They've expanded it, they've modernized it, they've done lots of things to it, but it's still here. And it was initially the home that George Mayfield built for himself, his wife, and a growing family of 6 children, or what would become 6 children. The funny thing that we know about George Mayfield, we know a lot about him. He was a failed everything. He failed in the trading post business, and but did escape with his red hair and his life. And he did make it back into the area. He did build Mayfield House, and he decided that he would be a doctor. And of course, he had no training as a doctor. He had no training as anything, really, other than the grandson of some very wealthy North Carolinians. But he did become a doctor, and he did bankrupt. And so he was apparently not a very good doctor, or not a very popular one. And the reason that we know about George is that he bankrupted as a doctor, and then later he also bankrupted as a lawyer, which was his second chosen profession, for which he had no training. And we're able to see the records from his bankruptcies where they inventoried all of his possessions in the house of Mayfield Place. Those are all part of court records. They're all handwritten in a very flowery script. And he didn't really own very much. He owned a table and a chair. They inventoried several dishes. They inventoried some beds, and that was what George Mayfield owned. He also, for his 6 children, did still own a large portion of the original land grant that he was given from the governor of North Carolina, or that his family was given. And he subdivided those parcels of land, or that parcel of land, into several small farms for his children. And so there are sort of remnants of what might have been some of those farm areas that still exist. And the reason that I'm telling you all of this is that our house that we own is very much part of the original Mayfield land grant. And years ago, we have a tract of woods in our backyard. When my children were little, I thought it would be fun for them to play in the woods. And so I built a trail. Having never done anything like that before, I decided to hack away at the woods and build an area where the kids could play, and where they could go into the woods sort of safely. And in the process of that, kind of defining how that was going to look, I also discovered our woods. We actually hadn't owned the property for very long when I was doing this, and so we knew generally where our property lines were, but it wasn't until I started going into the woods every day, trying to hack away space for this walking trail, or play trail for the kids. I wouldn't really upgrade it to a walking trail. We really hadn't spent time ourselves down in the woods. And so when the trail was finally finished, I had a friend who came over to pick up some of the leftover things, supplies and stuff that I had used to use it up at our elementary school for part of an outdoor classroom project they were doing there. And I very excitedly took them down on my new walking trail to show them what I had built. And as we were walking, one of the guys said to me, "There is a lot of vinca back here in this woods. You need to be careful, because vinca usually means there was some kind of house or something back here, and there could be a basement that's covered up by all the vinca and ground clutter, branches and leaves and all the stuff on the that had fallen in the woods." And he said, "You need to be careful that you don't stumble into or fall into an old basement of an old house." And that seemed like a whole new challenge to me. And so the second they left, Sorry guys, I'm just sort of not used to doing a walk like this. But the second they left, I went racing back down into the woods, desperate and sure I was going to find a long lost house, possibly one of the houses of the Mayfield family. Some of the children of the Mayfield family might have a house there. So I was walking really slow, trying to be really careful, and I fell. I tripped right over a rock that was sticking out of the ground, and I fell into a very deep indentation in the ground, and wasn't hurt. It wasn't a hard fall. There was a lot of soft leaves and stuff that I fell into in this pit, and I was more actually worried about snakes. And so I scrambled out of this pit, and as I scrambled out, I realized that this rock that I had fallen over it was rock, but it was a tombstone. And what I was standing in the middle of in all this vinca was not a house. I was standing in a graveyard that was deep in our woods, and completely, if you didn't know you were staring at it, you would have no idea that it was there, other than this hint of all this vinca that was growing out of control deep in the woods. And vinca, of course, you have to plant it, so it's like somebody planted that stuff there. So I was real excited. Of course, got the family down there. We were all sort of clawing away vinca, debris, limbs, branches, in one case an entire tree. And as we cleared it, we were able to identify that there were at least 34 graves back there. And absolutely no indication of who the people might be. None of the tombstones or footstones had any legible writing on it at all. We didn't want to harm anything. We didn't want to make it impossible, so we didn't try to clean up any tombstones ourselves. But we did call the state archaeologist, who looked on a bunch of maps that they have access to in the state system, and he told me there was no record of this graveyard, but he would like to see it. So he came out one afternoon and he measured the graveyard, and he agreed absolutely there were at least 34, possibly more graves. He said that it absolutely was a Christian graveyard because of the way that the tombstones were situated in relation to the sunrise. And he also found that we had more than just the graves. We also had a man-made built low rock stack walls that probably marked the boundaries of what the graveyard might have been. And he went with us and explored a little further, and we were able to find pretty quickly some taller stacked rock walls that would have formed a carol entrance. And a carol entrance is kind of a like gatepost area that is an Irish custom apparently for marking graveyards and showing where an entrance to a graveyard would be. So usually on the other side of carols or carol entrances, there would also be a road of some sort, and sure enough we could find a very clear signs that there had once been some kind of unpaved dirt pathway or road wide enough for carriages and horses to have gone back and forth for a very long way. all through the neighborhood, in the backs of people's yards. We were following this road. So the state archaeologists reported on all of this to make sure that it's protected, and that if anybody were after us to come, try to develop this property, that there would be a record that there's a graveyard back there, and there are all these historical Carroll rocks and piles and walls and things. And at that point, I called the city historian to let me know that we had an unknown graveyard. And in our city, the city historian had a committee of people who were interested, history buffs, and a lot of them were people who had grown up in the area, and they were all very excited. So I had an entire contingency of those people who came to see the graveyard. And we all hiked down into the woods, and one of the gentlemen who came on this hike was he was very senior, and I was worried about him the whole time, but he was spry, and he told me that he had been looking for this particular graveyard since he was a little boy. And he was so excited that he was absolutely sure, based on all of the descriptions that he had in all sorts of different historical documents that he had accumulated, that what we had discovered in our essentially backyard, deep down in the woods, was the original cemetery that was attached to the original trading post of the Mayfields. And so we had several meetings then after that with this historical committee of the city, and they did tons of measuring and counting of the graves, and they helped us clear some of it away so that we could actually see what was under the ground, or under the debris that had accumulated. And the one thing that we kept seeing in all of the records of the trading post was that, in addition to the cemetery that existed down the hill from the trading post, so we now know approximately where that trading post probably was. We haven't actually found it yet, but we're looking. And but the other thing that they described that was in relation to the cemetery was a well. So we're once again back to the old concern about falling into a hole that might be covered, or it probably isn't secure, but would have been the old watering hole. So we had a bunch of people get together, and we all kind of joined arms, and we were walking one step at a time, almost shoulder to shoulder, to try to locate the well so that we could cover it and secure the property so that there wouldn't be a risk that somebody would fall into it ever, or an animal would fall into it. And we didn't find the well that day, but we found something else. And this is not on our property, it's just off of our property. But what we found was an old moonshine still and an awful lot of antique, well, not antique, just old bottles. And there's a whole bunch of metal drums that had been set up. There was a whole bunch of connecting stuff that had fallen onto the ground. And it was pretty clear that that was a pretty active little place at one time. And we're confident that for that still to be sitting out in the middle of nothing, not too far from the graveyard, which they may or probably did not know existed, we're pretty confident that well is not far away from there. They just wouldn't have hauled water that far. So I needed something to talk about on this walk while I'm busy talking to myself and talking to you. And I thought I would tell you that story because it will help make sense of why the woods is such a draw for us, why we keep going back down into it, and why we keep kind of exploring it and looking for signs of the well, signs of people, signs of the fort, and trying to kind of piece together this whole little tract of land that is both ours and on neighboring property, none of which is, lucky for us, none of which has been developed yet. And we'd like to find these historical things before it is developed by someone who wouldn't know and wouldn't maybe care and would damage or destroy it, not even knowing that they were rolling over stuff. And so last year we had a pretty day, and my husband and I decided to go check on the graveyard. And so we headed back to the woods and headed down my mostly obliterated trail now. It hasn't exactly been kept up, but we still knew roughly where it used to go, so we were able to kind of follow what the trail used to be, and we went straight back. Of course, we knew where the graveyard was, so we went straight back to it. And this time when we went, we took a bunch of caution tape with us because there's a lot of concern in our area about development, and we straddle a couple counties, and while one county does care about development, the other county absolutely couldn't care less. And this graveyard kind of sits right on the border of the two counties, and our property straddles both, and so we didn't want any possibility that heavy equipment or even people looking to purchase property would survey it and not see that something was up back there or that they were on our property. So we were stringing caution tape around the graveyard to protect it. And then once we had that all secure and felt like it was pretty visible that there was something about this area that was different, and certainly that people were looking after this area, people were back there for some reason. We kind of wandered off into another part of the woods that is west of where the graveyard is. And there's some erosion that's happened back in the deep part of the woods, mostly because of construction that I'm walking through part of now, where they've built these houses and the water runs off their land and back into the woods. And so there's some gullies now that are widening, getting worse. And I was standing on the edge of one talking to my husband, and the ground kind of gave underneath my feet, and I was just wearing tennis shoes like I am now, and I actually slid down this embankment standing up. And it would have been really funny if I hadn't bounced kind of off a jagged piece of rock. There's something about me and rock, right? And at the bottom of the ravine, I realized I had gotten myself hurt. And it wasn't an ankle, it wasn't a foot, it wasn't a knee, it wasn't my legs at all. What it was my rib. And It was where I had, standing up, kind of come down this ravine trying to hold on to something. I was leaning into the dirt instead of away from it, and that's when the rock just kind of came up the front of me. And so the walk back to our house wasn't, wind tunnel, get through this. The walk back to our house wasn't as much fun as the walk down there. But we got back, and for a couple of days I thought, fine, no big deal. But I had a really, really, really big bruise around the rib area, and I thought, just probably ought to get this checked out. I think I'm fine, but you never know. So I went in to have it looked at, and my internist who I adore said, "Oh yeah, that's a broken rib. It's going to take a little bit of time to heal. There's really nothing we can do about it except, try to find a position to sleep in that doesn't hurt." And I thought that was okay. And then she said to me very brightly, "But because of where you're bruised, we really ought to just do a quick little scan, and let's make sure, you don't have any kind of internal something that we can't see. I don't think we're going to find anything, but let's just kind of be safe. You're here anyway." So I said, okay. And thinking it was pretty much going to be a total waste of time, I went ahead and had the scan done. And the scan revealed that I had 2 little spots, not on the side of my body that got hurt, but on the other side. And these little spots, they didn't think were anything. They were going to require some additional testing. And yes, all you liver people, these little incidental spots were on my liver. And so, out of the blue, without any thought that I would have anything interesting going on at all, I discovered that I have these 2 little places that now we're going to watch for a while. And so that's sort of my lead in to the Liver Alliance and how I came to be your 10,000 step walker today. It's been a real pleasure getting to help the Liver Alliance kind of be born. My role in it has been to help do a lot of the website stuff and get that put together, and I did some work on getting the Walk With Me site put up so that we could all register and walk together. And when it came time to look for volunteers to take you on a walk, I thought, well, I can do that. I walk anyway, and I'll just take a camera with me. I didn't realize it was going to be so windy, and I didn't realize that holding a camera is harder than you think it's going to be. I've never actually walked with a selfie stick before, and but it's great. I think we're doing well, and you guys are hanging in there with me, so that's even better. And I just thought you should know the real long story of how I came to be interested in liver. And well, my little spots are just being watched, and they are benign, and I'm very fortunate that they are benign. I also know that that part of the reason they're going to stay that way is because I can do some things to help the situation along. And one of those things is that I can walk. And I can walk every day. and get a certain number of steps in. My number of steps is actually higher than 10,000. So we're just doing part of my walk today, my normal walk, and then I can watch a little bit of, how and what I'm eating, because I also know that livers tend to be the garbage can of the body. Not tend to be, they are the garbage can of the body. And anything that I eat or drink, or for that matter, inhale. So I'm even now cautious about being around things that spew out a lot of scent that you're inhaling through the lung, candles and stuff like that. Careful about what I'm breathing, because all of those toxins end up having to filter through the liver. And I figure I'm just not going to give it any more stuff to be a garbage can for than absolutely necessary at this point. So that's my story. I'm hoping that as I round this little bend up here, the wind is gonna somehow find a different direction. And I'm hoping that you're not just hearing tons of wind through the video, that it doesn't sound like I'm talking to you through a wind tunnel. So anyway, this is part of my normal walk, and even at this point, we are still walking on what was part of the original Mayfield land grant. It's miles and miles and miles and miles of territory, and for people who know the Hundred Oaks area, to think that somebody owned all of that, all of the railroad yards, or what are now railroad yards, and all of everything from Harding Place all down Franklin Road and almost all the way through Brentwood. That's a lot of territory that somebody just got as a gift. And I guess at some point I'll be curious enough to go research, like, just exactly what did this Mayfield family do for the King of England or the Governor of North Carolina that got them such favored status, because I don't know, but it must have been something. And the funny thing is also that the land wasn't interesting enough to them or important enough to them. It took 3 generations for them to finally decide maybe they should come check it out to see what they actually owned and what their gift was. And I know it was tough traveling in those days. It wasn't easy to get from that New Bern, North Carolina area all the way to Middle Tennessee, but you would still think that they would have some curiosity about the land that they owned, but they didn't. They never came. Just the grandsons. And even then, one of the grandsons didn't survive the adventure, and the other one was sort of a ne'er-do-well. Just kind of never quite had a profession he was any good at. So it's kind of funny. I can't get over this day. The sky is so blue. There are no clouds, and it's tempting to take this jacket off because I'm heating up. I don't know about you, but I'm heating up. So anyway, that's the Mayfield story. That's my story. And my actual work that I do is that I build and design websites and manage other people's social media. so I guess that's another thing I can tell you about on our trip. Not that you're that interested in that kind of work, but you might be interested in some of the things that we have experienced with some of our clients who can be sort of lessons for the rest of us about how we go about thinking about what we're doing online and how we're doing it. Some of you may have responsibility for business or, where you work, for those social media accounts or online accounts. And so I'm going to tell you some of the things that have gotten folks into trouble, especially lately. And here's this dog that just barks and barks and barks at me every time I walk past him. There's usually two of them. I only see one today. And so he's going to bark. And I guess before I start telling you about some of the online stuff that's happening these days, I am going to tell you that we are right now at the halfway point. And so I'm going to take just a couple more steps here, and we're going to turn around. And it's time to turn around and head home. So wherever you are in your walk, you can also turn around and begin to make your way back to your starting point, or to your car, to wherever you were. And we are now a little over halfway through our walk for today. Oh, I'm walking straight into dog and wind. So, for online do's and don'ts, I think that one of the things that you should be aware of is that it's really hard to separate your personal online social media from being picked up and tracked as part of your professional social media. And so I just sort of want to give a word of caution to people about the things that you are saying that you think are on your personal Facebook page, or something you said on or you posted to YouTube, or something that you posted to your Insta account, that if you're also managing your business's social media account, or you're the business owner and your business account is connected through your name or phone number or whatever, you should be aware that some of the things you say can get you put in timeout for your business. And the biggest company that is concerned about what you're saying online in your personal life, that has a lot of say-so over your professional life, is Google. And so we've had some clients whose views have trickled over into their business account information. It's not that they're posting in their business account, it's just trickled over. And so we always want to kind of be aware that what you say in one place is not necessarily separated as carefully as you think it might be from your professional stuff. The other thing that, boy, if I had just a quarter for every time I have worked with a client and I've said, okay, so to get this stuff started, I'm going to need to log into your social media accounts, I'm going to need to log into your website, I'm going to need to log into this, that, and the other. And they all look at me and tell me they have absolutely no idea how to get into any of those accounts. They have given over the login credentials and all of that information to an employee who no longer works there, or in some cases it's even worse. In some cases the employee was fired or left under terrible circumstances, and they left with the keys to the front door in terms of the social media accounts and the website. And this client is now kind of in a world of hurt about just getting control back of their own assets. And so I guess if I'm going to talk about business for a half a second, would be to really plead with you, even for your personal account, so that if something happens to you, somebody has the ability to get into these accounts and close them down, or get into the accounts and post some kind of a message about, you're unable to respond right now and the business is temporarily closed, or whatever. You need to have an actual physical log where it's under lock and key, under old style lock and key, and everybody knows where this log is located, so that you're not dependent on one person having the run of the entire account. And then on top of that, about every 90 days or so, those passwords, they all need to change. And no, it's not okay to use the same password for every account you got. They all kind of need their own passwords. We're seeing a real unbelievable tick in very aggressive hacking into online accounts, the business accounts especially, small websites that have some unbuttoned down back doors into the website. These foreign hackers, they're coming from outside the United States. Hackers are actually being able to pierce into websites and put some code into the core of your operating system for your website. And they want you to see it because they use a lot of language that would cause you to wonder why that language is in there like that. A lot of foul language, a lot of stuff like that. So they want you to see that they've been in there. And they want you to know that at any time they can corrupt the core of your website, the core operating system, and your website will be gone. And so rather than ransomware attacks, we're seeing this is the new way to try to get businesses to pay to have their websites cleared of this content this code that's been added to the operating system of your website. It's very frustrating, it's expensive, and it's a very delicate maneuver to try to remove this code, because one little false move with removing it and the website really will be gone. For those of you who think you've got a backup or a restore on the website and that you could just reload it, it's not going to work because your operating system is what they've pierced into, not the files. So anyway, that's my serious lecture of the day that's business related, is to be careful a little bit about your making sure that things that you're saying on one profile are not trackable to another. No matter what it is you're saying, it's certainly not company's business to know what your thoughts are, you know, as you communicate personally. But it's also not the company's, they shouldn't be punished for anything you're saying out there either. And they will be if your accounts are linked in ways that you wouldn't expect to find them linked. Whether it's your phone number that's listed as the recovery, or an email address that you put in as the recovery, stuff that might not be seen on the front side of these social accounts, but is incorporated into the back. That's all trackable. And so if you're a social media manager or website manager, content manager, you should know that. And then the second is to really be sure that you know how to recover these accounts if someone leaves, or if you're trying to have updates made by a third party, they're going to need access to all these accounts. You're going to need to know how to log in and not have to scramble, or not have to go through a whole bunch of recovery steps trying to regain access to your own accounts. It's expensive. All right, so that's enough of that lecture. We're just gonna, so that you can see that we're actually just literally a halfway there and halfway back kind of walk. I've turned around and I'm just retracing all my steps now. And we'll head for a day. I hope you've got the glorious day that I've got, that you picked a pretty day to do this walk with me. These are just kind of the days that you tend to treasure when you realize, like, wow, we're in the 60s and it's February the 1st. You almost can hope for spring. I actually, a couple weeks ago, saw that a whole bunch of our tulips decided it was time to come up again. So I talked to them really sternly. I don't think they paid any attention, because they're continuing to come up in our yard all over the place. And the daffodils are starting to come up. And I don't think it's at all time for that. I think they should wait. But they're coming. And tulips are my favorite flower. They always remind me of Dr. Seuss, when they kind of all get twisty and turny as they open and then begin to fade away. But I just absolutely adore tulips, and so my husband this year decided he would plant even more tulips. The bulbs don't always come back, and they arrived about a month ago, and they're still sitting in the box in our living room. Well, not our living room, in the entryway. Just exactly pretty much how they arrived. And this would be a perfect day for him to be planting instead of working. I think he'd probably agree with that. And it really is. I'm sort of overdressed for this walk. I didn't realize it was going to be this hot. And I'll tell you, when I first started walking, it's been a couple of years now since I've been doing these really like daily long walks, because I was doing them really even before that little incident in the woods. But the very first day, I was challenged to walk 300 steps. And, you know, as somebody who works on websites, it's pretty sedentary work. I'm sitting all day, working on a computer for the most part. And so you have to kind of challenge yourself and remind yourself that you got to stand up every once in a while, much less stand up and walk. So I got challenged, I remember, to 300 steps. And I remember going, 300 steps? Oh my God, 300 steps? Who can walk 300 steps in a day? And then, I was told, your phone has a step counter, so just watch the phone. You'll see on the step counter how far you go and how much further you'll need to walk in a day to do 300 steps. A lot of little yappy dogs. And so I was laughing because I very quickly figured out that just my trips to get coffee were more than 300 steps in a day. So I felt pretty good about that. Like, okay, 300 steps. I pretty much got that knocked. I do that anyway. And the good thing about walking is that while we're doing 10,000 steps all at once, you don't really have to walk that way. You could do small walks or cycles throughout a day and still get your 10,000 in, but just not do them all in one fell swoop. So that's fine too, if you want to walk that way. And so after I realized that 300 steps was not 300 steps, I very quickly graduated and realized that in reality, if I really watched my step count, really kept my phone with me and knocked out steps every day, that I was easily doing about 1,500 steps a day just with my trips back and forth for coffee, back and forth, just ladies' room, even from parking the car to getting in to the building. That was easy. So then I started to realize, okay, I can sneak in a few more steps without even feeling that I'm challenging myself by always parking my car as far away from the entrance of the place I'm trying to go as I can get. So when I go to the grocery store, that's my car that's at the very top of the lot or as far away from the door as you can get, because the walk from my car to the grocery store entrance counts. And so instead of trying to park as close as I can get to the door, I'm parking as far away as I can go to the door. And it's funny, you tend to have an easier time finding a parking space that way too. But I do that now everywhere I go. I never try to park close to a building. I never try to, pull right up to a door. I actually am looking to give myself a few extra steps just getting in and out of the car. And another thing that I started doing as I started to look for ways to increase step count is I started taking stairs instead of escalators or elevators, and realized real quick that it's an entirely different set of muscles that you're using when you're walking up and down stairs, and then instead of just walking on a flat surface somewhere. And so it's another way that you can just it doesn't take a whole lot more time than standing around waiting for an elevator, especially now that you don't want to get into a crowded elevator. You want to be kind of in the elevator alone these days. So you just take the stairs. And if you need to hold on to handrails, good, hold on to the handrails. But you're using those leg muscles and sort of building building up where you didn't have muscle, or you've lost a lot of muscle over time from just sitting. So that's another trick that I've learned. And another trick that I've learned is to make sure that I'm drinking a lot of water. And I drink just plain water, don't add anything to it. Everything you add to it goes through your liver, and the water goes through your liver too. But if you're adding sweeteners and flavors and coffees and teas and things like that to your water, yeah, you're getting hydrated, okay, but you're also getting a lot of other stuff. So just drink the water. And I've learned that cool water is better than ice water. It seems to go down easier. You can drink more of it. And it has sort of a fresher taste than putting ice cubes in your water. So that would be my other suggestion, is to ditch the ice in your ice water and just drink cool water. And thank you. So that would be another little tip for getting your body all kind of ready to go do this on a regular basis. And then the other thing is to make sure you're wearing socks. Good socks, not cheap socks. Invest in socks as carefully as you might invest in a shoe. You want socks that don't slip, and you want socks that will absorb your sweat, keep it away from your skin. And you want to get those socks kind of off as soon as you have kind of wrapped up your walk for the day. Go ahead and take those socks off and swap them out for a better, cleaner pair, drier pair. So that's another suggestion that I have. And while I'm not wearing it the way I normally would wear it today, I wear these bands, and I wear them as a kind of a headband, but they're real wide, they're gaiters. And so they go down and cover your ears. Because I think that for me, the place that gets the most uncomfortable in these walks is actually my ears. They get so cold. Okay, so that selfie stick has taken its last breath, I think. And so I'm going to try to do the rest of this walk with a handheld camera instead of the selfie stick. So I'm sorry you're all that much closer to me now instead of a little further away. And I think I was just talking about gaiters and the fact that it's your ears that tend to get the coldest when you walk. And so those gaiters, if you wear them like a headband, you can kind of pull them down over your ears and keep the wind away, which is great. And for those of you who like to walk with AirPods in or headset on, doesn't interfere with that functionality at all. You can still hear whatever you were listening to for your walk. And we're coming up on this house that's getting a new roof, so I'm going to step around it into the street a little bit. So they've got the sidewalk kind of blocked off. Actually, just since we left, they finished a lot of that roof. I didn't think they were going to make much progress today, but they've just whipped right along. So that's going to get finished. I bet the people living in there are happy that it's going to wrap up. It's just an absolutely glorious day. People are starting to discover that it's a glorious day, and they're starting to come out to play. It's got a family up here kind of throwing footballs, sort of, mostly chasing footballs. So that's kind of fun. It's just way too pretty to be inside. And it's also, for me, a little bit time to think about what the rest of my day is going to look like. And I'm thinking that I may need a little trip to the grocery store to do a shop. You know, I used to find myself in the grocery store like literally almost every day. On the way home or something, I would just dive in and pick up like one or two things or a couple of things or just even something for dinner or one ingredient or just something. And it's kind of funny, since COVID, I'm not really doing that anymore. My shopping has changed, and now I do like one big trip to the grocery store instead of a whole bunch of little ones. I don't know about anybody else, whether the way you shop has changed or the way you go in and out of stores has changed, but it sure has changed for me. So now it feels like almost a game. Like, how long can I wait and get away with not going to the grocery store before we're in such bad shape that there's just literally nothing in the pantry anymore? So we're kind of hitting that point. And we also have a birthday coming up in our family this week, so I need to think about what I'm going to do to get ready for that. In our household, birthdays are all about the food. It's all about the menu that somebody has picked out for themselves, and it's also all about the cake. Or actually, this year, I have rediscovered making banana pudding in a trifle vase. And so that's become in lieu of cake. We've had just huge banana puddings that are really actually more fun than cake, I think. And we've been trying to figure out the candle thing. So to blow out candles now, you stick them in the cake, then you take them out of the cake and you blow them out somewhere away from the cake, so you're not blowing on everybody's cake. So we're learning to do new things and do them differently, and that's great. We will get through all of this and someday have a chance to tell our stories about how the pandemic changed the way we do everyday things, just kind of normal stuff. So the other thing I think I told you early in this walk is that no matter which direction you go in, I am always walking straight into the wind. So here we are, we're walking straight into the wind, and I feel like Mary Poppins, where the wind came from all directions to bring Mary Poppins to the Banks children. And that's exactly kind of how this walk always feels, where no matter where you turn, you're walking into the wind. Other thing that you haven't been treated to on this walk, and I probably should bite my tongue because we're not quite done with it yet, so it can still happen. But usually in this neighborhood, there are tons of landscape companies mowing lawn and trimming hedges, blowing leaves, and it's just loud. So kind of excited that we missed all of that on this walk. It's just a lot quieter. You just get to listen to me talk. talking earlier about making sure that you're drinking lots of water, just plain water without flavoring. I didn't really tell you what the secret to drinking water is as far as I'm concerned, because the real secret about drinking lots of water is that it makes you have to stand up and walk to the bathroom a lot during the day. And those are just all sorts of hidden extra steps that you are going to take without even really thinking about the fact that, yeah, you're walking, you're taking steps. You just have a different kind of destination. So anyway, those are the finished up of my hints for how to get a good walk in or get a good number of steps in without even really thinking about the fact that you're stepping. Just remember that they all count, even if you don't have your phone in your pocket, or like me, I wear a Fitbit, so I can kind of keep track every day of how much I really did walk. But maybe some people don't really care, so you can even do your walks by how much time you're spending doing it. And I know I told you about an hour and 15 minutes is what we would take. It may have taken just a little bit longer today for me to walk this, because I'm just not used to holding my phone out like this. Or before I had it on the selfie stick, and that was even a little harder to balance. So I may have been walking just a little slower than I normally go. But we're going to get our 10,000 in. And we're just now leaving what used to be, when we first moved here, nothing but cow and pasture land of a very large portion of the Mayfield estate that hadn't ever been developed. And now we're heading back into my part of the neighborhood, which has been the part that we know that the 6 Mayfield children did all have their homes grouped on this portion of their land. And then the Mayfield home is probably about half a mile from here, the one that you get right out of. With any luck, the mail will be in my mailbox by the time we get back up the hill. Because there's our mailman. He's coming today. I think we have a new mailman. I didn't recognize him. So anyway, we're now back in our neighborhood. And the one thing about living on a hill is that what goes up must come down, but what went down also has to go up. So in my walk, I get a little mixture of both right at the end of my walk, because to get to my house, I have to go up a hill, and it doesn't look like a serious hill until you're actually trudging up it. But then when you get to the top of the hill, you get to run down the hill to the house. So I start with the walk up the hill to the street. I end with the run down the hill to the house. And when my son was little, he used to be in charge of carrying the garbage can down the hill each week. And the garbage can was way bigger than he was. And the hill is really, as you know, or as you're going to see again, really steep. And he would just fly down the hill with the garbage can trailing, pushing or dragging him down the hill. It outweighed him, even when it was empty. Okay, so I'm going to just gently turn the camera around so you're not looking at me, but you're looking at where we're going. And that's the hill that we're going to climb. And at the very end of it is where we're going to kind of reach our 10,000 steps. And I'm really just excited that you came along. I hope you stayed, and that it didn't seem like 10,000 steps. And I guess the other thing you should know is that 10,000 steps is about 4 miles. So you've gotten a little bit of a good hike in today, in addition to this kind of gentle neighborhood walk. But roughly every 2,000 steps is a mile. And so we've made a pretty good little hike today. And I hope that you might even decide that you can rerun it and walk with me again on this jaunt that we did. And I hope that it's impossible for me to know while I'm recording this just how bad that wind got, but I'm hoping it wasn't terrible, or that it didn't last long on your end. And I'll be honest, when I first started walking, I would get to about this point on the hill and think I needed to sit down, that it was just too much of a hill. And I still sort of feel that way. It's just too much of a hill. But I just plunge forward anyway and keep on keeping on. Because if we stop walking and we don't ever get up, you know, it's that old adage, if you use it or lose it. And some of you may be older than me. Some of you may be a lot younger than me. But if I can do it, I'm absolutely positive you can do it too. And sometimes it just helps when we do it together. And it just doesn't seem quite so long or quite so hard. So I'll turn you again around so that you can kind of see which way we're headed as we go up this last kind of leg of the hill. There's a white house that you can see kind of up there in the woods through the trees. And that's about 2 houses down from the end of the road. So, I know I keep saying we're getting there, but we really are almost getting there. And how about you? I'm almost back to my starting point. I'm hoping you're back to your starting point too. Or that at least you're close. We had a lot of storms come through here and knocked a bunch of limbs down in the neighborhood. Fortunately, nobody lost power for very long this time. We got a storm a couple months ago and we lost power for 24 hours. And I try to keep a lot of food in the freezer just, in case. And I had to cook a lot of food because we lost power for 24 hours. So I guess there's the good news, bad news about trying to stock up. Is that when things blow, you can have to do an awful lot of fast turnaround cooking. I had every pot and pan and skillet in the world going in our house for a while there, trying to cook all that food. We had a lot of casseroles that went back in the freezer. And of course, the good news for that is that we have a lot of casseroles. We're still working on them. And now we're at the top of the hill, and we're pretty much headed back now to our starting point. And you're about to see that we can just zip down the hill and we can swap our socks. Remember to do that. Don't run around in sweaty socks. Make sure that you get something to drink. A little bit of water. No ice, just cool water. Drink it slowly. Don't gulp it down. And we are back. So thanks for joining me. I hope you enjoyed it. I enjoyed walking, and I hope you get a pretty sunny day. I hope you walk often and come back and walk with me.